first response to adversity is this: I can become embittered. The sorrow of the men had twisted, it had mutated and become bitterness. They have slid. What does bitterness mean? Let me establish that. Bitterness means to be vexed deeply, to be angered, to be troubled, to be profoundly frustrated, so much so that brash and impulsive decisions are made. And that's exactly what we're going to see. They had slid from devastated to deeply vexed. Their anguish had become seething anger. Their burden was twisted into bitterness. And it's interesting to me, in this passage, there is no mention whatsoever of consulting the Lord in this situation. He, their God, was conspicuously absent. For the 600 men, God had been completely left out of this situation. He was nowhere in the equation. And when that happens, bitterness is the result. So I want to talk about three. I want to ask the question, what are the results of descending into bitterness? I want to give you three results of descending into bitterness. Number one, bitterness dishonors God and it disparages his character. When we are in adversity and we scramble to solve our own problem, or we exhaust every other option before turning to the Lord, or we don't turn to him at all, it communicates this very clearly. I do not trust God. It dishonors him. But secondly, those around us who we have declared our faith in God before, they know that we're a follower of Jesus. They know that we have put our faith in God. They're watching us in adversity and they're seeing us scramble. They're not watching us go to our knees. They're seeing us scramble around trying to figure out the situation, and it communicates to them God is not trustworthy. It disparages the character of God. So when we function out of bitterness, God's name is dishonored and his character is disparaged. But number two, bitterness defiles many people. Hebrews 12:15 says this: see to it, make sure, be vigilant about this, that no root of bitterness springing up causes trouble. That's what bitterness does, causes trouble. And by it, many are defiled. Many are defiled. You guys, we have to understand, we think COVID has been a scourge in our nation. Bitterness, the virus of bitterness, is far more serious than the virus of COVID. Far more serious. In verse 6 it says, the people spoke of stoning David. Well, where did that idea come from? Somebody, out of their bitterness, put the blame for this whole thing on David and began to propagate, began to tweet, began to post, began to circulate a petition. David needs to go. This is David's fault. And by it, it says all the people were talking about stoning David. Bitterness defiles many. Our culture is filled with bitterness, propagated and provoked by media and social media. We are toxic with bitterness, angry, frustrated, vexed. And this hasn't skipped over the church. There are many believers that are just soaking and in all sorts of toxic bitterness. Brothers and sisters, it ought not so to be for us. Should not be that way. But number three, bitterness results in destructive decisions. Destructive decisions. They were thinking about stoning their leader. In this moment of deep emotion that had descended into bitterness, they were going to take out, to kill the man who had rescued them, who had mentored them, who had protected them and provided for them, God's anointed king. And as you read the rest of the story, which we won't get to today, he's the one through which God provides the answer to recover every single one of their loved ones, all of their property, and come back with far more beyond that. He was the answer, but they're getting ready to stone him. When we make decisions out of bitterness, it clouds all of our decisions, because bitterness is the hot lava that comes out of the volcano of anger, and decisions made out of anger are always clouded. These decisions create more problems, not less. So bitterness results in damaging and destructive decisions. But verse 6 does not end with the bitterness of the people and David getting ready to be stoned. It doesn't end there. Let's go back to chapter 30, verse 6, the last half. It says this powerful statement, but David strengthened himself, or as another version says, but David encouraged himself in the Lord, his God. But David encouraged himself in the Lord, his God. There is another way to deal with adversity. Adversity always offers a fork in the road, a second option.